on today's show.
I was really anxious to kind of prove myself and show that I could build a product. So I found, and it was when Slack was also kind of coming out, I found this interesting thing happening where I was joining all these private Slack groups, and they were kind of like interest-based, almost like AOL chat rooms.
Mm-hmm.
But Slack did not surface these rooms within their website, and so the simplest way to build that product was I found a template. It was basically like a Hacker News Product Hunt white label solution, and I created Slack chats, which became the number one ranked app on Product Hunt for the day, and I built that and by build it, I mean I really just kind of like took a current product and just kind of slapped my logo and branding on it. But I think I did that in a night, and then suddenly I released it. It was really quick, and then I released it on Product Hunt, and suddenly, just by releasing one product on Product Hunt, people began to think of me as a product person.
That's awesome.
And then I kind of got the itch to build more of these. So I built, there was something I built called Request for Startups, where VCs could submit ideas they wanted to fund. There was another one called Startup Adoption Agency, where people, like tired founders could put up their startups for adoption, and people could adopt the startups. And there were all these little projects that were kind of leading me to this place where I began to think of myself as a product person, because I was able to do it repeatedly, and all those products became number one on Product Hunt, and suddenly I was really confident.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Creator Institute podcast. Your host, Erin Koester.
Jeff Morris Jr. gets the prize for the best ever introductory letter for a job that I've ever seen in my whole life. He wrote a letter to me when I was at Zarly. We had just started the company, and said, I'm willing to pay you to work for you for 2 months. Not only did it blow my mind, it ultimately signals a lot about who is this guy named Jeff Morris Jr. Today, he is the head of product revenue for Tinder, which is an incredible story that has shown really the power of incredible people working on an important product. And he also runs his own venture capital firm, investing in startups. But what I love about his story is the fact that he really did have to create his way to these positions. He was sort of stuck, feeling a little bit like he couldn't figure out his next move. He left Zarly and was sort of searching. And so he decided he was going to start in a coding boot camp, but it wasn't starting for several months. So he sort of needed to fill his time. And so he decided to basically work for some friends, work on a couple projects. And over that period of months, he launched 3 products on Product Hunt, and all of them shot to number 1. And while he was waiting to start the coding boot camp, this experience as a product guy, launching his own products, getting them out there, having them succeed, was ultimately why he got a job opportunity and an opportunity to really help transform the product at Tinder. It's an awesome story showing the power of just putting yourself out there, just learning and doing things that showcase to other people what's possible for you. Jeff is an awesome peer person. I highly recommend you follow him on Twitter, one of my favorite follows on Twitter. Anyone interested in product, interested in startups, interested in venture, just interested in just being awesome. Jeff Morris Jr., ladies and gentlemen. Jeff Morris Jr. So excited to hang out with you, my man. And I was telling someone the other day about your and my adventures together, and this person happened to tell me, I follow this guy on Twitter, and he's one of my favorite people on Twitter to listen to. So your reputation precedes you as a thought leader of dropping Twitter knowledge bombs.
That's my goal in life, is to be a great Twitter follow. So I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, it's random. I mean, seriously, someone was like, do you know Jeff Morris Jr.? And I sort of was like, do I know Jeff Morris Jr.? Like, I've slept on couches with Jeff Morris Jr. But it's funny. I think it's interesting to see how as you sort of developed your voice, it has sort of become, you've sort of become a thought leader in at least the product space and thinking about the way to build cool products people love.
Yeah. And I think it hasn't happened totally on purpose. I did notice, especially in the product world, there wasn't a ton of content from people who were in the kind of in the weeds on building products, who were speaking with kind of an honest, just like fresh voice. It was, I think, a lot of people in tech and in Silicon Valley, they share articles of, maybe they're featured in TechCrunch, or but they don't really dive into the day-to-day of what it feels like when you're when you're having doubts about what you're building, or when you release something and it goes really well, and just sharing your really honest feedback. And so I hope when people read my account, they feel like they're almost building products with me and feeling my emotions as the process is happening in real time.
Yeah, no, it's like I've missed having you in Slack with me all the time. So now I feel like I get a little snippet of JMJ whenever I am. So one of the things that I always love to tell is the Jeff Morris Jr. origin story, where I got to meet JMJ. And so I'm going to quickly tell, like, from my perspective, and then I want you to sort of tell it how you were feeling through it, because I think you have this really interesting story where in some ways you were like born inside the belly of the tech beast, and you kind of like left it to go pursue this career in entertainment, and like kind of like snuck your way back in through this unique opportunity. So I wanted you to tell it, but let me tell my version of the first piece, and then I want you to sort of tell the origin story and how it happened, because I think it's a fascinating lesson in this concept of like, basically when you realize you have to do something to stand out, you have to be thoughtful and creative. And I think your story is one of those magical ones. So my story with JMJ, the first time I got to meet you is Zarly was in its infancy days. It was probably like less than a month old at the time. We'd launched at South by Southwest to a quick accord, and Ashton Kutcher was one of our investors, and so we basically were riding the wave of like the brand name of Ashton, and like we had a lot of really great things going for us, and we launched and it just kind of worked. There's a bunch of things, and so I remember we kind of made this announcement that we were looking for folks to join the team, and we were just in like all out crazy hustle mode. And so the first guy we hired was a guy named Adam Coombs, who's from Kansas City. He happened to be there the Origin weekend. And he basically put out this APV to like all points bulletin to anyone who wanted to kind of get their foot in the door, but was willing to move to Kansas City. And I remember like late at night, it must have been like super late night because we were on all the time at that point. I get an email sort of with something of the subject line that said like, "You'll never believe this." And in it was forwarded an email from you, which was a cover letter that will live in infamy with me. That basically, I'll paraphrase it, that said, "I'm so moved by the mission and I'm so moved by the opportunity that I'm willing to pay you guys to work for you for 2 months in order to prove myself." And like we were like a tiny baby company at the time, right? Like we were nothing, but yet like in all the things I sort of like had to pinch myself and say like, what the F is this? And I think like from there it moved pretty quickly. Like I think Adam was sort of like we were all moving a million miles a minute. I was getting on a plane and I was like, I basically said to him, I got to meet this guy. So do whatever you can to like, learn if he's like batshit crazy, but if not, like we want to hire this guy for sure. And like I did a little talking, and you were like actually like not a legit. You were like legit. You weren't like sort of a crazy human. But anyway, like so you joined Zarly. You basically packed a bag and moved to Kansas City. And like I credit you with actually our early success in bringing this idea of creating these hyper local communities that launched Zarly into its first successful iteration, and then carried the company through various different endeavors to now moving on to like working on some direct product experience with your own and otherwise, and then now being in product at Tinder and having your own investment firm. So that kind of was my fast version of the JMJ story, but my origin story with JMJ was that specific email that was like, I can't believe what just came into my inbox. So why don't you tell the story from your perspective about how that sort of email came to be and kind of how it all fit into your overarching narrative?
Yeah, of course. So So I was trying to get into technology for a while, and I wasn't having a lot of luck. I you know as you said, I was a relatively normal, I like to think credible person, but just getting that first job is really challenging. And so I went to South by Southwest in 2011, and went there really with the goal of just figuring out who which companies were interesting, and who I should try and work for. And I was at a DFJ party, venture firm, and I happened to have a chance to talk with Tim Draper, who is an investor. And I said, which startup are you most excited about? And he said Zarly. And then I went and I talked to someone else at the same party, and I kept on hearing Zarly was the company that that everyone was the most interested in. So I went home.
Do you know this? So I remember the moment when we pitched Tim. Like, it was a total accident. Like, we were basically in the corner, and Bo and I were like talking to him, and he was like drinking this whole thing up because for him, I think it was like, I think he believed in the broader thesis behind local commerce, and it was like the early days of the internet. So I remember, that's funny that you said that, because I remember he'd never heard of Zarly. Like, we weren't a thing, but it basically kind of this happenstance, we were in the right place. Maybe that's part of the magic of South by Southwest, that we got to talk to him and tell the story, and lo and behold, that led to the JMJ experience.
Yeah. So, and that was when South by Southwest really was a place where you would find the coolest startup. Like, you went there and you could discover something new. So right after that, I went home, and I followed pretty much every employee. You guys didn't have a website, I don't think, but I figured out who was working there, and it was probably like 4 or 5 people. And so I followed every single one of you, and was just really kind of tracking the company from the employee's point of view. And I remember I was up pretty late one night, and this is what you mentioned earlier, and Adam Coombs posted just, it was a simple tweet saying, "Hey, we're looking to hire our first 2 people." And as part of that tweet, I think it did have a job description, and it said, "We'll either be located in Seattle or Kansas City." And so I had no idea at that time where you guys were planning to hire for the role. But I wrote this crazy cover letter, as you mentioned, and my entire goal of that cover letter was just to make you guys stop in your tracks and say, who the hell is this? Because
job well done. Job well done.
I knew that you guys were really busy, and I also knew that you guys were the hot startup at the moment. So I just wanted to get your attention, and that was, so the Zarly model, as you know very well, is naming your price on anything. So you'd say, I'd pay X for, I'd pay $100 for someone to clean my house, or there's a million different use cases. But I applied that use case to my cover letter. I said to myself, what would this opportunity for a job actually be worth? And the answer was pretty clear. Like, it would be worth 2 months of salary for me to get a chance to work at the hottest startup and prove my worth. It's like a no-brainer if you actually think about it. So I wrote the cover letter, and Adam Coombs got me on the phone the next day and told me about the role. And he said, you sound like a smart kid, and would you be willing to move to Kansas City tomorrow? And at that point, I was just like, at that point, it went from you guys thinking I was crazy to me thinking you guys were crazy. Because I'd never.
Yes, job well done.
So it was like the meeting of crazy minds. And so I said yes without thinking about it, and then hung up the phone and thought about what that actually involved. And I realized the only thing for me it really involved at the time was buying a plane ticket and getting on a plane. And so I was single at the time, really didn't have any attachments to San Francisco, and so I booked a plane ticket and showed up at the office. I think the joke that I tell, and it's true, is I didn't know if it was Kansas City, Missouri, or Kansas City, Kansas. Like, I didn't even know. I didn't know what state I was going to, and I really had no idea how long this was going to last. So I just packed basically one suitcase and showed up at the office without a home or an apartment, and book a room at a nearby hotel and was sleeping out of a hotel for a week. And then, as we started to dig in more, I think we both sides saw that it was going to be a good fit. So, ended up just having an amazing experience with the team at Zarly and you and Bo, and lived in New York. You guys moved me back to San Francisco eventually, and was there for about 3 years. And then, as I was kind of graduating from Zarly, I was more involved with growth marketing, and and that ended up being a lot of product work, because you're running paid acquisition campaigns from Facebook, and then you're sending people to a landing page, and you're trying to get them to sign up for your product and buy something. And I really started to think about product just in terms of funnels. So how do you get a user from point A to point B to point C? And it just sort of clicked for me. And so when I left Zarly, I was like dead set on finding a rolling product. Again, was kind of faced with this, what you mentioned earlier, is it's really hard to get your first crack at anything. And so I didn't really know. It was similar to the original job situation when I was just trying to get into startups. I didn't know how to get into product, and as I was talking to people, the only thing I could do to kind of control my destiny was to start building products myself.
Make real products, right? It seems like it's so obvious, but it's like so few people actually do it. And surprise, surprise, you actually did it. But let me before I don't want to go too far yet into that piece. I want to come back a little bit, because I think what's one of the things that I sort of loved about you, and I think it was something that I think a lot of people can learn from, is you never saw yourself as an employee. And I think that's sort of this interesting thing. There is this, like, in particular in San Francisco, everyone sort of feels like there's this, like, everyone has this cult of entrepreneur hero worship, right? Like everyone wants to be the entrepreneur, which, as both of us know, like, heavy is the head that wears the founder crown. And sometimes it's not nearly as glorious and glamorous as everyone may think, or as, lucrative in some ways. But like, you applied a really interesting approach to your, sort of your career that I got to be a part of, which was you always treated things like solving an entrepreneurial problem inside an organization like an entrepreneur. And I'll quickly tell the story of, I think your insight of we didn't know what the hell we were doing at the start. And we in a lot of ways, always were trying to figure out random things. Was we were trying to be one of the first companies to create hyper-local communities, and we were using social media heavily. And I think it was your insight to say, what if we were to do in-person versions of these hyper-local communities to supplement, sort of take the online offline. And so tell me a little bit about how you thought about those sorts of things of like always being entrepreneurial in your role.
Yeah. So I think in that case, we knew that we were going to launch this product in many different locations. And I remember one day we walked into a room and there were just like 40 cities listed on a whiteboard. And we kind of just, and there were probably, I want to say 5 or 6 people at that time who were kind of in my position, if you want to call them like city managers of sorts. And I remember just thinking, I'm going to pick the cities where I have the most friends and the most connections, because that's my value in this situation is when you're trying to build communities, it needs to be, especially for a local marketplace, there needs to be a grassroots element to what you're doing. And startups in general, they have to have that kind of organic initial user base that you can only get really through being on the ground in many cases. And so as part of that, I remember putting my name next to San Francisco and Los Angeles, and I think Boston was the other city. And then I just got on like I was like, how do I solve this as an entrepreneur without engineers? I just literally, I'd arrive at the office at 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. and I would just I was calling people all day long, just trying to tell them about the idea and ask them for 15 minutes of their time to just listen to what we were building. And at the end of every call, people would just naturally say, let me know how I can be helpful. And my response to that was, I'll let you know how you can be helpful. So we would follow up with these people and we would organize events in those cities, and they really became kind of the foundation. We eventually built online communities. I think we called them dream teams, where
dream
we
teams.
had 30 to 40 people in each city that we were launching in who were advocates and supporters of our company, and we didn't even have a product at the time, but they just loved being a part of something. I think we're all so busy with our lives that if someone actually reaches out to you and invites you to join a cool entrepreneurship group, which it was mostly in these groups, kind of like entrepreneur types, you'll listen and probably participate. So we were just trying at that time to leverage our value, and at that time it was mostly just our personal connections, and being really, really aggressive and kind of hustling really hard in terms of creating awareness for the product.
Yeah, it was I think that sort of simple act, that decision of realizing that it's a human on the end of this. I think we always thought that, but I think there was this effort of this dream team and these hyperlocal local community groups was a powerful insight. I think, and in some ways that probably colors a lot of the ways you have always thought about product. Is it's always been about people, which is quite fun. So what if you had to look back on that experience in terms of like developing you as a product guru that is today? Was there any particular moment that stands out? I mean, you had a bunch of really interesting, bizarre, random moments along the way, in an adventure that adventure, which I think all of us did. But anything that stands out as this was a memory that defines kind of my journey, and maybe in more particular, kind of what this set you up for the next stages ahead.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in those early days was just like being able to, like, you can always have an impact on your business, even if you don't have a lot of power within your company. So I think we all felt, as you said, we felt like we were owners of the company because we were early employees, and we had a lot of pride in what we were doing, and we didn't have a lot of resources, but we did have we had Facebook, we had our phones, we were kind of doing everything we could within kind of our means at the time. So I've always been, I think Zarly made me a very scrappy entrepreneur and scrappy to my product approach. So if you talk about building MVPs, like that was what got me into product, where I felt like I could release something without being an engineer myself. Like I kind of stopped viewing products as this big daunting thing that you have to release, and you can release products in many different ways. It doesn't have to be a fully fleshed out app or website. And I think it was just kind of like thinking of ways that I could leverage what I do know, my current skill sets, to create products. And I still do that. I never think in terms of like, what if I can't build this? It's more like, how can I just test this concept and see if I'm on the right track?
Yeah, that's cool. So, and then you had an adventure at Zarly. In a lot of ways, I think, like you said, Zarly brought you back home, right, into the sort of product world and into the world of startups much deeper. How did after that, you started talking about basically saying you weren't, as much as you were involved in kind of quote unquote building and testing sort of products at Zarly, it wasn't really something that you could demonstrate, hey, I built this. This is my sort of product expertise. So you went in and basically, went to the lab and started making products, right? Some of your own and others with others. Talk about that kind of that window from Zarly to eventually what led you into Tinder. How did you sort of create sort of evidence of your experience and knowledge in that window period? Yeah,
sure. So the first thing I did was Product Hunt was coming out at around that time, and I was really anxious to kind of prove myself and show that I could build a product. So I found, and it was when Slack was also kind of coming out, I found this interesting thing happening where I was joining all these private Slack groups, and they were kind of like interest based, almost like AOL chat rooms. Mm-hmm. But Slack did not surface these rooms within their website, and so the simplest way to build that product was I found a template. It was basically like a Hacker News Product Hunt white label solution, and I created Slack chats, which became the number one ranked app on Product Hunt for the day. And I built that and by build it, I mean, I really just kind of like took a current product and just kind of slapped my logo and branding on it. But I think I did that in a night. And then suddenly I released it. It was really quick. And then I released it on Product Hunt, and suddenly just by releasing one product on Product Hunt, people began to think of me as a product person.
That's awesome.
And then I kind of got the itch to build more of these. So I built, there was something I built called Request for Startups, where VCs could submit ideas they wanted to fund. There's another one called Startup Adoption Agency, where people, like tired founders could put up their startups for adoption, and people could adopt the startups. And there were all these little projects that were kind of leading me to this place where I began to think of myself as a product person, because I was able to do it repeatedly, and all those products became number one on Product Hunt, and suddenly I was really confident.
Did you think of yourself as you're going through that experience of like, there's this kind of cult and fantasy world of like, I should start a company, I should be an entrepreneur, and especially like you're in, you've got this network that is all people who are, like that, thinking of those things. Did you have this temptation to say, I need to go raise capital and start a company? Or did you keep thinking of this as like, I'm just learning how to be a great product person?
It was a little bit of both. I think if any one of the ideas felt like a business, I probably would have taken that part of it more seriously. It was more, I think I was just more liking it to like, like an athlete going to the gym and like trying to like get better at their craft, or like it was reps for me. It was just repetition. Something interesting happened though was, as I released these products, I was starting to get job offers for product roles.
Oh, really?
Within tech. So suddenly the idea that I couldn't get in the door was no longer. It was the opposite, where I was starting to get really interesting offers at different startups, and so that's when I kind of decided. I was going to General Assembly to learn how to code, because I then convinced myself that I needed to learn how to program.
No way. Oh, really? So you were like saying, like, I guess to really, you sort of were buying into the whole thing of like, all right, like there's more of these prerequisites. I got to learn to code, but that's awesome. You listen to the market. They're like, no, wait a second.
Yeah. So I was doing that. It was a full-time boot camp, and then I was consulting. I started a consulting business for products, and I worked at some really cool companies. I worked at a Y Combinator company. I worked at Monkey Inferno, which is Michael Birch's product studio, and then I was served as a VP of product at interim VP of product at another company. So suddenly I went from someone who was just struggling to get in the door to I was having doors open up for me, kind of all over the place, and it was all through just kind of making very simple products and releasing them.
It's crazy. I mean, I think you're a perfect, case study. We talk about creating evidence of your passion and your expertise. And that's why I think it's interesting. Like there's sometimes this fascination that you need to start a company in order to be seen as credible. And what you sort of proved is that there's an ability to just show how you create a product to demonstrate to people that you're a product person. And you went from I say this tongue in cheek, but basically being willing to like pay to make it in the door of a startup, which in fairness, we never asked you to pay to work entirely. I just want to make it clear.
I know.
But no, I mean, you were looking at use it as a marketing technique to like, now people are like, hey, we want you to come here, and you're fighting off people to be a product. And product is basically like the hottest job in tech, right? Everyone wants to be in product. It's sort of like the thing. And there you are now suddenly a real product person and not having to do many of the prerequisites people thought about.
Yeah. And I think what you said is right. Product is such a hot field right now. The biggest thing though is if you're interviewing for a product role, like you need to have some body of work to show me. So I know how you think, and also if you're scrappy enough to be a good, like if you haven't released a product on your own, it's hard to convince me that you're going to be really entrepreneurial and kind of ambitious once you get in the door.
That's a big insight right there. That's a really big insight. I mean, I probably get someone every week asking me, "Hey, I want to get into product," and you're saying that if you're looking to even hire someone, even probably as an intern at now Tinder, you're looking to see what have you released on your own.
Exactly. I mean, it could be the simplest thing ever. It could be a music blog where you just post things that you're listening to. Like it doesn't have to be a fully fleshed out product that is meant for commercial use, but you should be building things on your own. This should be something you're passionate about, and this is what you're doing in your free time because you love to build products. And that passion is so obvious when someone walks in the door.
That's awesome.
So yeah, if you can't get yourself to do this in your free time, you probably shouldn't be doing it professionally.
Yeah, that's true. And then, so Don, tell me about the how did Tinder happen? And then I also want to hear a little bit about your current sort of, I'd call it your side passion of investing in other great product companies. How do all these things happen? Because now you sort of, you're from not knowing how to get your foot in the door, sort of overflowing riches of productness that you get to do to coach investment and stuff like that. And now at Tinder. So tell me the story of how Tinder happened, which is again, going from probably the hottest company out there in the mobile app space today.
Yeah. Tinder was really, it was, so a guy named Levi Nitzberg, who was the head of talent, reached out to me through my brother. And I think he had seen some of my work online. And he approached me, and was just, I was always really curious about Tinder because I was, I'd been a user of the product for a while and also just...
In fairness, but I've got to say this, in fairness, you were not just a user of Tinder, you were a user of every single dating app out there as an alpha user on any one. And I remember that I could basically tell that we were at peak dating app when you were like, basically every day of the week using a different one. And it was, as the married guy in the room, it was always fascinating to see your product sense with like, this one will work, this one won't work. And so anyway, I knew Tinder was going to be huge because it was something that you never let go of even throughout your many tribulations and trials dating in San Francisco.
Yeah. And there were trials and tribulations, but but no, I was fascinated by the product. And when Levi reached out, he explained, and I thought Tinder was a huge company at this point, but they only had 60 employees, and this was in 2015, and it was already a global brand. And they needed a lot of help with retention marketing, and so he offered a really cool position to come in and kind of really define what the user lifecycle program would look like in terms of things like push, email, in-app messages, and there were things that I'd done previously. At Zarly, actually, a lot of it, and also at a few of the startups I'd worked at post Zarly, and so it was a role that kind of gave me a lot of flexibility internally because there was nobody who was currently doing any form of retention marketing and was able to really stand out. The kind of the moment that helped me at Tinder was I was put on a discounting project, and so. Basically, it was the first time Tinder was going to offer users discounts for our subscription product, and my efforts there kind of showed people that I knew how to create kind of product funnels that monetize users in really cool and creative ways. And so from there was, and I think it's a good lesson for anybody. Like if you can impact revenue at a company, you will get a lot of attention. And so, and so
the ultimate metric.
Yeah. And I think attaching my work to a really important metric like revenue, really helped me progress. And from there kind of went on to lead the revenue team with Yiki Meng, who's our engineering manager. And we became the top grossing app in the world on the App Store this year. So it's
amazing.
That was exciting, and I think we just think we're kind of getting started. We have a really small team still, and a really exciting roadmap that we want to execute on. So we're excited.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, I think that it is, as you say, right? Like it in some ways, it's almost kind of like a second act in a lot of ways for Tinder, right? I think Tinder in a lot of ways was thought of as this sort of fun, like going to be this sort of short-term concept in some ways, right? Like people sort of thought maybe it was a fad. And I think you guys have over the last 2 years really helped establish it as a real like player that's just getting started in the dating app world, which is a big, the dating game is big. So I think there's still a lot of room to be had.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think once we started to kind of show that we could become a real business, and we started to release some of the metrics around that, and also as we started to rise in the App Store charts, that's like the metric that everyone could see publicly. I think people start to realize that Tinder is here to stay. Like this is in my mind a generational company that will be here for a very long time. And so yeah, I think the respect from the product community has been awesome to see. We're getting so many more kind of like so much more inbound interest from people asking us to kind of help them with their products because they think we have some secret magic, and so that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have come out the other end of the no monetization sort of startup world and come out the other side and figured out a way to monetize an audience that truly loves you, and I think that's again, I in some ways I'm glad I didn't have to ever date during the era of Tinder, but I also feel like I sort of missed out on seeing some of the magic that mobile dating has caused. So it's pretty cool. So tell me a little bit about your in a world where your side projects and side hustles have continued to demonstrate, you've also continued to dip your toe in the water a little bit of helping others through both advice and through some investment by kind of creating your own venture firm. So tell me about that and how it fits into the overarching JMJ product guy story.
Yeah, of course. So I made my first investment in 2013 while I was at Zarly. I was evaluating vendors for a CRM project we were doing at the time. And it was like 6 Stanford PhDs who were starting this company. And we happened to talk about fundraising, and they said, we have a round open right now. And I followed up by emailing the founder, and he let me in his round. And so from there, like similar to being, to working in product, at that, like once I made that first investment, then in my mind, I thought, now I'm an investor now. Like I can approach people and ask them about their companies and meet with them for coffee. And so I was doing a lot of investing on my own, just really casually.
And was your first investment very big? I mean, how much dollars, just for the context for people? A lot of people don't know.
That was $15,000. So, it wasn't a huge investment. It was, it's definitely a lot of money, but in terms of writing a big check, like you don't have to write a huge check. And then, if you're looking at platforms like AngelList, like you really don't have to write large checks. You can invest in companies for $1,000. And so I did a couple more of these kind of like smaller checks on my own. And then this year I started, and I was investing on AngelList too. And this year, one of my goals heading into 2017 was to start my own fund and then also start my own syndicate. And so I run it's a private SPV through AngelList, and I didn't really know how to get started, but again, I just started emailing and calling everybody I knew and telling them that I wanted to do this. And they were
the JMJ special secret weapon.
It's amazing how non-magical it is. It's like just I was waking up early, and I probably would email 20 people a day who I knew were investors, and a lot of them were on AngelList already. And suddenly I had a couple $100,000 in backing on my deals. And then now it's up to, I have over 200, I think it's 205 investors and $730,000 per deal in backing.
Wow.
On AngelList. So
that's crazy.
So it's all opt-in. So we end up doing check sizes probably, 150 to 250, but it's a real thing. And so it's and we've done, I think we've done 7 deals this year. So it's become just a much bigger thing.
Yeah. And I think I saw a comment on Twitter where someone was saying that they want you as an investor because of the fact that you've been building products.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny now that like your ability to sort of monetize, quote unquote, your knowledge comes also in the side of sort of investment opportunities of founders who want to actually raise money from a founder who, knows how to build product.
Yeah, and I think that's my whole kind of pitch to entrepreneurs is I bet you have a cap table full of professional investors, but do you have really kind of like high level operators or people who truly understand what you're going through and are building products themselves? And so for them, it's exciting, I think, to have operators, and there aren't that many people who they talk with who are building products. My sales pitch is I'll be there to help you build your products, and let me on your cap table.
Yeah, I think it's great, and I think it's just a really interesting story. I think to sort of summarize the JMJ Rise sort of story is I do think that in all of these cases you didn't rely on kind of others. You relied on yourself, and you sort of would always go back to that simple concept of what can I create to show, what can I do to sort of learn. And it's sort of fascinating to see that each step along the way has led you here. And I sort of smile fondly thinking back to sort of your first product, which was an email cover letter that said, "I'll work here. I'll pay you to work here." And I think as much as we may snuff and say that was just a marketing stunt, it really was a product. Like, I'm the product, and let me show you an example of myself as a product marketer. And it's pretty neat to see how you've continued to do that over the story arc of your career.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I've loved having you by my side. I think you of all people, you've probably seen it firsthand the most with someone like Bo Fishback. So so it's fun to talk with you, and just I don't have time to reflect on my career very often, so it's fun to it's fun to have someone else kind of tell you their perspective. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, man. I appreciate it too. And thanks for spending the time. This is awesome. I got some good stuff in here, and I'll send you, like I said, I already pre-wrote some of it because I used that as my research effort to get your the knowledge that I was going to chat about with you today. So it's kind of cool to hear get some quotes to add to it. But I'll send you the stuff and books scheduled to come out in April.
Congrats. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's exciting. It feels neat to see how it all fits together, because I think what this whole entire concept is on is exactly. So we went out and studied all of the Forbes 30 under 30. So there's 3,400 of them. And we analyzed their career and looked at what they did. And there's this premise that they all went to the really good schools, or they all kind of like started companies young. And the reality is that's not actually true.
Yeah.
They much more follow the story arc of you, which is they demonstrate by creating something first, and then that leads them to a company. So people could look at you and say like, oh, JMJ just sort of like, started this venture firm and that's why it's successful. But the reality is you created these products that then led you. So we find 9 buckets usually, and it's things like books and podcasts and video series. And so I think your story arc fits exactly into that one, which is why, as I was writing, I was like, well, shit, I got to write this story because it fits exactly in. And hearing you talk about it as I didn't know the General Assembly thing, which is amazing to me that how that fits in, to go from like feeling like you needed a coding boot camp to break in to sort of like just going out and hacking together some products to show off is pretty fucking amazing.
Thank you. Well, it's great to catch up, and let me know how I can help you with the book. I'll definitely share this story when it's out. So I'm here to help. You
are epic. Well, I will share more as it comes along, and it's going to be fun to start to share the story, because I think a lot of people don't quite know how to they think of people like you or me or others as these like random snowflakes. And It's been interesting now that we've got like over 100 authors and more in the pipeline. You can start to see how you could actually create credibility structurally, as opposed to kind of, in your sense, was more of your own hustle and willpower to get there. So it's kind of cool to see. Yeah. And I think the more examples people see, it's empowering. Yep. You don't feel like you have to rely on someone else to help you get there. So I like that. 100%. That's the story. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. I will be back in touch with this sort of stuff, but I really, really do appreciate it. It's fun to talk.